I think the market is far simpler outside India. If you're built for India and succeeded in India. Once again, I think the Indian consumer is evolving in a uniquely Indian way. I think what Nandan's saying is absolutely right. Not only will these brands, will the thousands of brands be born, I also think that they will all be actually very, very sustainable, profitable businesses.
Capital and large amount of capital will not decide who wins or who goes on to build large businesses. We are very proud of Delhivery. Delhivery is the largest logistics company in India, and you are not even 20 years old in a space which has primarily been dominated by big names, which we grew up listening to. उन सबको पीछे छोड़कर Delhivery आगे गया. And during pandemic, I hope all of you saw during the last 3 years the stress that we had gone through. Delhivery also went for an IPO, very successful IPO. बहुत ही in the right principles, you built the business and you've got to that scale which is in a space which is not easy. So today I would say that let's begin with this. How do you build the largest logistics company in India and from India to the world in such a short span of time?
So thanks Shraddha for that, for those compliments. We still believe that it is really, as Jeff Bezos says, it is still day one in India and for Delhivery. I think where we've gotten to today, if you just look at the potential in the Indian market and with an economy that's growing fast, that is modernizing fast, which is formalizing, I think we are probably just at the beginning of the journey. While we've listed, and it was a great I would say milestone. Again, I think it's not the end of the journey. It is actually the beginning of a new journey in that sense, right? I think we were at the right place at the right time to start with, and I think that's very important for any business. I think we entered the market exactly when the old ways of doing things were changing a bit. People had started buying online. GST was on the anvil. It had not yet come in. It came in 2016, even as, and it was a very big boost to a national logistics network like ours. And I think those were the conditions that were fairly, I would say, conducive to the growth of a logistics company like ours. But I think what I think was unique about our model and in the way the founders thought about it and we executed it was the fact that it was a model which was completely designed for India, right? We did not take a network design which worked in the US or in China. And there was a lot of discussion about it, right? We would meet people who would tell us, why don't you do what people in China have done? Because, what we knew was that for a operations intensive industry like ours, the model has to be designed for Indian needs and in a manner where, where you can achieve the right outcomes suitable to Indian conditions, right? Like, for example, ultimately logistics comes to only three things, right? There is basically reliability, which is if I tell you I will deliver on X day, I deliver on X day. There is efficiency, which is cost. How much do I cost? Nobody wants to pay for logistics. You want to pay the least possible for the right service. And visibility. You always need to know where your shipment or your freight or your truck, where is it, right? So I think in our case, at least, we just stuck to these principles. We said everything we do, whatever we build, whether we build tech, any data that we use, any data analytics, when we invest in infrastructure, it has to go in the cause of one of these three things, right? Or ideally all three things, right? So I think that's really been the journey of Delhivery. What I would sort of take from this journey, and which I think is applicable to a lot of businesses, D2C brands, we work with a lot of brands, right? is that when you design a product that fits the Indian consumer, the Indian environment, you are designing for one of the most difficult use cases in the world, right? And then for you to take it out, I would say that sure, there may be a little bit of a journey to learn in terms of how to go out of India, but I think the market is far simpler outside India if you're built for India and succeeded in India.
Ajit, today Ronnie Screwvala was saying in the morning, and I'm just bringing this here, is that he said that capital and large amount of capital will not decide who wins or who goes on to build large businesses, because one of the challenges we see is that मुझे capital नहीं मिला तो I couldn't build a large business. Delivery came in the last 15 years, and it's built in a space where there were incumbents and there were large incumbents with capital, but you were able to disrupt. And I just think that as a startup ecosystem, one, we have to acknowledge what Delivery has done, because this is something, you're not in the B2C space, so maybe there's not much of a talk about like the other B2C startups, but Delivery has done that. Right? I want you to take us through the scale of operations that today Delivery is catering to.
I think we are very happy that we are not as much in the spotlight. If we could be even less in the spotlight, we would prefer that, because we are a company where it's a strange thing. If we get 99.9% right, the other 0.1% adds up to a few thousands of people who are not happy with our service, right? So just sort of, that's really the nature of our business. But yeah, I think in terms of scale today, Delivery now, we serve all of India, almost 20,000 pin codes, massive amount of infrastructure, close to about 100,000 people who work directly with us, and maybe another 50-60,000 people who work full-time but for our vendors and hence with us. About 3,000 delivery points, 3,500 delivery points actually, and close to about 100 hubs. So close to about 20 million square feet of infrastructure. Now, what does that mean, right? It means in terms of scale, 1 out of every 4 parcel that is bought by any Indian online in India is going through Delivery, right? One of the lesser known facts though is that we are also and it's a business that we got into about 5 years back, we are also the second largest player in the freight space in India, right? Where traditionally you would have heard, names like a Safe Express and a Gati, etc. Today, we are actually the second largest player in the space, and this was a business that is just 5 years old for us, right? We also have a large cross-border business. We are the India partner for FedEx. FedEx actually operates through us in India, and we had used that relationship to actually help Indian companies reach outside India or help people from outside reach India, right? While we run the India leg, and we also facilitate the international leg, right? So as it stands, I think you probably know what our revenues, etc., and they are now publicly declared. We ended last year at about 8,500 crores of revenue. But in terms of the logistics infrastructure and in terms of the amount of tonnage that we handle, right? Those are the numbers. Those are the kind of numbers that we are sort of looking at. Close to about 170,000 tons of different materials flow end to end across these 20,000 pin codes every month.
When you were saying this, I was just thinking in MBA, Southwest Airlines, FedEx, these case studies we studied about. We should study about Delivery, and this generation should study about Delivery, because achieving that in the last, again, I'm pointing in such a short span of time is not easy. Brings me to the macro question. I really want, because दो चीज़ें मैं पूछना चाहती हूँ. अजीत, जहाँ पे आप बैठे हैं, you have a very close view of the consumption that is happening in the economy. You'll like from consumption to where to what is not happening, what is happening right. Tell us about the Indian consumer today. What changes, shifts are you seeing? And fundamentally, why do you believe that the next 10 years is going to be the Indian consumer story?
Sure, I think this is possibly like a 1 hour topic,
Of
right?
course, this can be like a master class
Yeah,
session.
but I think a few things, right? I think COVID was a big milestone. I think it basically opened up a lot of the Indian consumers who were very set in terms of how they wanted to shop. It opened them up to options, right? They started trusting online. They started going online beyond just an Amazon and a Flipkart and actually trying out things. They've also made the shift back to offline in some sense as you know as sort of the COVID wave went away. But broadly, I think today the consumer, if you ask me, the biggest trend that we see is that the consumer actually is very flexible in terms of what platforms and how he actually shifts across platforms. So, you know, I think where it is all going to is that, and omni-channel has been a much sort of used, abused word right from the beginning. But I think today the consumer is really multi-hatting in some sense. He's actually able to straddle different platforms for his buying decisions, depending on what he is buying, when, how, and exactly, at that point in time, what he wants to do, right? So the same consumer who possibly buys one category completely online, on another category may actually be doing a 50-50, right? So he still buys two brands offline because he likes going to that store, but at the same time he's trying out another two brands where he has no idea about where the offline this thing is. He's comfortable doing it online. And then there's the whole, buy at store, return at store, or a whole lot. So overall, I think the consumer is, and as I think consumers always are, they are always two steps ahead of everybody else. They are trying out new things. And I think, once again, I think the Indian consumer is evolving in a uniquely Indian way, right? Some of them are jumping directly from having done, having only gone to general trade, okay, all the way to online, skipping modern retail completely. They don't even go to a supermarket, right? Some of them are sort of, reversing the journey. So it's a very uniquely Indian, I would say,
Why,
trend.
Ajit, I'm asking you this question is that Nitin Kamath, and not just Nitin Kamath, a lot of people say that jo Indian middle class, the paying India,
Yeah.
is a very small segment of India. But today, because you are delivering parcel to one of the, one of the 4 parcels that get delivered, what do you have to say? Ki, kya hai ye India?
That's, while that is true, I think there is, I think it is true that basically there is a small segment of customers who represent, what Nitin calls as the really consuming class. But I think what we're forgetting there, right, is that while that is the set of consumers who's probably driving frequency, there is a whole large segment of consumers who are probably not at the stage where they're driving frequency, but they're experimenting, they're buying, right? Yeah. They may be ordering one pizza a month, right? Yeah. But they're ordering that one pizza. They're buying those two things online which cost 350 rupees. But that is how it starts. That is how consumption habits change over a period of time. Look, one thing I think which over the last 10 years, at least I feel has seen a complete resurgence, right, is aspiration. Yeah. Right? I think there was a period of time when aspiration, after the big bust of reforms in the 90s, early 90s, when people were really aspiring to get rules, I think there was a period of time when there was a lull on that, right? And I think over the last 8-10 years, with how the government has actually been sort of, branding a whole lot of things, etc., the aspiration has come back, right? So you're right. Frequency may be driven by a small set of people because that's how the per capita income trend in India is, because that's where a lot of the consumption is. But the next big fat middle is consuming and is very aspirational in terms of what they want to consume. If they're buying a 500 rupee shoe today, I can tell you for sure that they are also checking the websites of brands where the same shoe costs maybe 2,000 rupees.
Yeah.
They may not order today.
Yeah. So I was speaking to Nandan Nilikani and just asking him what are the 2, 3 big things for the next 10 years, which we as entrepreneurs and people should think about. And he said one very key fundamental thing which is going to happen is that next 10 years, India will see brands. We will be a branded country. So there will be hundreds and thousands of brands coming. And I know Delhivery today supports and works with a lot of D2C brands. Tell us, what shift are you seeing over there? Are you seeing that happening at scale?
So I think the first thing that we've seen, right, over the last, and I think this is where COVID was a very big shift, right, is look at the breadth of products that brands cover today. So there was a time, I think 3 or 4 years back, where while D2C was happening, it was very sort of selective. So, people would do it in, I will do a beauty brand, costing so much. There would be 3 people competing in that space, right? So today, there is a brand for every need that is coming up, right? Yeah. And at every price point, right? Now, what does that mean? And that's exactly, what is happening is, at least the way we see it, is that the whole brand story has gotten democratized. So if you know how to make a product for a specific segment, 15 years back, if you were not a Hindustan Liver or a Marico, etc., you could never aspire to reach consumers beyond a certain geographic area. You were limited by that. That limitation is gone. Now you have to figure out who is my consumer. He may be anywhere. I think what Nandan's saying is absolutely right. Not only will these brands, will the thousands of brands be born and in India, I also think that they will all be actually very, very sustainable, profitable businesses.
Yeah.
Which most of them will not actually require external funding.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's the nature of consumption. That's the nature of how these businesses work. And that's where I think people like us, whether it's a delivery, and a bunch of other people, right? People like a Shopify, for example, their AWS came and democratized access to computing resources. Everything has become a variable cost.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You don't have to sink in huge amounts of investment into creating, ancillary networks which serve your main business. You have to focus on the consumer. What is the product that you're selling? How do I approach? How do I sell? How do I drive repeat? Right? And there's a whole bunch of other people who will come and help you do everything else. Right?
Yeah.
So it is that environment that has gotten created. And I think, in a sense, it's our job to do it. That's our business, right? And the more we lubricate these things, the more we create that environment, I think that democratization leads to more brands being born.
My other question is that, again, from India, at one point we couldn't aspire, or we would have aspired, but we didn't maybe have this, is that you have a brand, logistics brand, which is not just for the country, but it is from the country to the world. And today that is happening. And I'm so proud that we are in this India, that if we go tomorrow, then we will have a delivery somewhere in some part of the world. What does it take to build that? How are you thinking through your global marketplace play?
Yeah, so in our case, at least, we've been very clear about one thing. We do not have a physical network outside India, right? And we don't intend to set up one. I mean, sure, we might set up something small here and there to consolidate stuff. But our main, I would say, principle here is to enable access into and out of India. So anybody wants to come into India, or anybody taking things out of India, right? That's our sort of job. And in a sense, the challenge for us, or I think the way we're going about is a little different. It is basically to make sure that the entire transaction is seamless. So whether it is basically the pickup from your place, transporting it all the way to the airport, from there to the other city, and to the final delivery, it's all seamless. It's almost like when you take a flight, right? There's a code share that airlines do, right? They may operate with different networks. So you will take a flight from India to New York. You may actually use 3 different airlines, right? But for you, it's one ticket. You put the luggage in at one side. It's come out at the other side. You've reused different brands of airlines. Okay, but it's a seamless journey, right? That's what we are trying to build. And the second thing that we are doing is that And this is something which I think you will hear more about over the next few years. Is that what we figured is that a lot of the technology that we built to solve difficult problems in India is technology that other logistics companies or even retailers can use for their own operations outside India as well, right? So we're actually exporting the IP, right? So in traditionally logistics was never associated with IP,
Yeah.
right? So that's the second thing that we're doing. And so in a sense, I would say I would be more proud if, a few years down the line, every package delivered or some percentage of packages delivered around the world actually have an underlying system that is running on a delivery tech stack.
What you're saying is that there'll be some, not a lot, I don't want to put words, but you are looking at building products that could be used
That's right.
by different players and
That's
it could
right.
be used across
That's
the
right.
world.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Our first couple of products have just been released, and we're first experimenting them in India uh, in networks outside of delivery,
Okay.
right? And then we will take it. We'll start taking it outside to the world.
Ajit, a question on behalf of all the entrepreneurs. Delhivery, 8,500 crores of revenue, the crazy market cap. What is your market cap? Tell me.
I think it's somewhere in the region of about 33,000 crores. I actually don't. I haven't seen it for a while.
Chalo, 32,000 crores. These are huge numbers. How are you engaging with the startup community, with the entrepreneurs? And is there a plan to look at some kind of an investment, acquisition? Because you've done some in the past.
Yeah, so I think I'll separate out these two questions. I think mergers, acquisitions, etc., are more for us in the nature of what makes sense to our core business and in which way we see the company growing. So I would separate that from the startup question. I think interesting companies in the logistics, warehousing, logistics technology space is something that we keep looking at. We have a team which works more or less full time looking at that. We have done a few investments and acquisitions in the past, and it is something that we will keep looking at very carefully, right? So far as the startup ecosystem is concerned, I think we are in a great position. Number one, which is that we work with a lot of startups because of what we do, right? And one of the things that we've tried to do as part of our core business principles, right, is that we've tried to make it easy for people to work with us. We don't ask for minimum volumes. We don't ask for massive deposits to work with us. So the way we've structured all of what we do on the commercial side is that we would like the small startup to start using us at a very, very early stage. On the on how we've built up and how we engage, right? We've tried to make all of our sort of work completely systems oriented, so people can actually do a lot of self-serve work. They can just log on to our platforms and do it. Outside of that, I think a large part of our senior management, founders, the early employees, all of us engage with the startup community. Whether there are clients or not, we try and keep a lot of informal engagement because what we feel is that many a times what a lot of startups need is that 5 minutes or 10 minutes of advice when they're stuck with something, and that's most valuable. We haven't really formalized anything. To be honest, we don't have a formal program to groom startups, etc. We were part of a few accelerators, and as part of that, we work with them to enhance their own programs. But I think, like you said, it is something that we will keep looking at how do we further increase that engagement, right? And how do we make it meaningful and deeper?
Yeah.
I think that's for us the most important thing, because I think a lot of this, when you start, you have to think it through. Because it does take a lot of energy and time, and if you want to make a difference, you have to plan it properly and actually invest those resources. So I think we'll get there. To your question, maybe we should be doing more, and we're happy to do more.
Ajit, I like you so much, and I also like you, and I'm sure all of you, we are having, the time is limited, but you are the CEO, you've been in delivery from the very beginning, you've donned various hats, you've also been the CFO. मतलब जो भी है वो सब कुछ you have done. And the depth of knowledge and humility that you bring, I think these people like you should be more having this conversation and we should have more master classes and sessions. But the question I'm going to ask you, कि पैसा बन गया और founders बहुत सारे अभी in your company, some of the founders have also, you know, they are pursuing different things. You've been there from the beginning. हमारा सबका milestone होता है कि IPO जाना है, पैसा बनाना है, बड़ा सबसे बड़ा, you know, logistics company बन गई है. But you're still at it. You're still putting everything to the business. What gets you to stay on and do what you're doing?
I think fundamentally it is the people you work with. I think when you work with people who are smart, who you like, who are with whom you can have an honest, clear conversation every single day, I think that's the fundamental thing which sort of keeps you happy. I have a very simple motto, which is that when I wake up in the morning, if I ever feel that कि आज नहीं जाते office, I think that is the day when when you switch off, right? Look, I think we almost all of us who are here, right? Like, and a lot of senior people who've been with Delhivery for a very long time. I don't think we are here because we are aiming at some kind of a milestone. I think we're here because we love doing what we do, and fortunately for us, we are in a sector where there are so many new problems that we can pick up and solve for and keep building another business or another business line every single year. Right now, I think we're lucky that we're in such a business in that sense, right? Which is that when you get bored of something, there is something new to do. There's something new to build.
Yeah.
So I think that's really what it is. And to be honest, I think the listing, like I said, is a milestone. Look at companies that have endured 50 years, 100 years. Like, who remembers when they got listed at what, in what environment, etc. What you remember is how they've done over the really long term, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's for their shareholders, whether it's for their customers, whether it's for their employees, and that's what ultimately are the signs of a great company. So I think we are very early in that journey, I would say.
This is such a deep and nuanced and very good conversation. I really wish that we can continue talking. But thank you so much, Ajith Pai. I'm saying huge respect for the way Delhivery has built. I was saying that, last 1 year, there's a lot of negative. I was in IIT Bombay 2 weeks back, 3 weeks back. And someone on the stage, in the audience, I was sitting on the stage, बोलता है, madam, आपका startup ecosystem में तो अभी सिर्फ घोटाला है. And I was saying that just because of one or two stories that we are listening to, they are such fundamentally strong businesses like yours, that Delhivery, we have brands which have disrupted the way India is also working. And that to me is the startup story.
No, I agree, and I think you made a very valid point. I think one of the things that we've held very dear at Delhivery, and it is something that I do hope businesses of every shape, size, as they are formed and as they start growing, keep very close to their chest, is basically the fundamental principles of governance and working with integrity, right? I think there could be a lot of short-term rewards if you deviate from that path, but I think in the long term, that is what works best. That is what generates, I would say, the best happiness and the best wealth for the largest number of people. I think, to my mind at least, that is something which every such incident that comes up and people talk about it, I think the big lesson to take away from it is basically that I think we should hold governance with a lot of value and treat it as a core principle.
Yeah.
Right? And I think so long as we do that, I think value will get built up.
Thank you so much. Keep delivering.
Thank
क्या
you.
कहते हैं, out of the park when
Thank
it
you.
comes to logistics space. And we look forward in the years to come that you engage more with the startup communities.
Thank you.